God. Hello and welcome to our Founder Curious series. I'm Nina Axelson, the founder and president of Grid Catalyst, a clean energy accelerator focused on equitable pathways for northern climate innovators and solving challenges for our climate up here in the Midwest. I'm really excited to be here today with Elizabeth Turner, a longtime friend, colleague, source of inspiration in this work. We started this series this summer because as a woman who's worked in energy for most of her career, it can be challenging to navigate. And when you add entrepreneurship and running your own company, you're layering on challenges. And we want to be able to showcase success stories and show people how amazing it is to be on this pathway, talk about the challenges on this pathway, and really maybe open up that opportunity for others who might be interested. One thing I want to make sure to mention is when we talk about being a founder or an innovator, we've discovered that a lot of women in particular don't self-identify into this area. And so this series is not just for someone who already has an LLC, or already has a business plan, but thinking about the skills that it takes to be an innovator and an entrepreneur can absolutely be applied into your own professional development and personal development as you move through your career. And we do hope that they lead to more businesses run by women. 11% of energy companies today are run by women, and I'd love to see that continue to change. So welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for being here in this conversation today. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your company.
Hi, Nita. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with you this morning. I am an architect and certified passive house consultant, and I founded Precipitate 5 years ago because I wanted to move the Twin Cities and in Minnesota more broadly to decarbonizing buildings as quickly as possible. Minnesota's been a leader in that area for a long time, but we have a lot further to go, and we need to do it really quickly. And I felt like taking the bigger established firms where I was working, it's harder to take those risks. And so I took that risk and started Precipitate and kind of blend not only architecture, but sustainable design consulting, climate and resilience planning, and teaching and education.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm always impressed when I hear you talk about this is what we do, because the scope of what you do versus the size of your team is pretty it also seems to be a very common thing when we see entrepreneurs in this space, because this is the set of things that you care deeply about, right? Climate, equity, sustainable design. And so as an entrepreneur, you're able to say, this is what I'm going to focus on because this is what I care about. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I think it's like, there's a desire in non-entrepreneurial spaces to say like, well, that's not architecture. Well, that's not education. We don't talk to legislators as part of our job. Like that's not a billable hour. And yet we can't actually solve the climate crisis unless we do all those things together, and the same people are doing them, or the same organizations. I think, yeah, I'd love to talk more about that. I think it's interesting because a lot of legislators we talk to, for example, are like, it matters that you're a business owner talking to us and not only nonprofits. Like there's for sure a role for nonprofits, but legislators also want to see people from everyday jobs and professions coming to talk to them too, not just kind of saying that's only the thing professional lobbyists do.
Right. Yeah, that's such an important point. And even some of us may be like thinking we can have our biggest impact if we stay in our business lane, but recognizing there are multiple points of influence. So that's really important. So we've already started to talk a little bit about what was the catalyst for becoming a founder. As far as being mission driven, is there more you want to say about your inspiration, or like what the aha moment was for you to go out on your own?
Yeah, I was teaching a class at the University of Minnesota on It's called Sustainable Communities, and there were some great readings of that were part of that curriculum on systems thinking and how we make change happen in systems. And it became really clear to me that there was a reason why climate action wasn't happening when women weren't at the table. And that was over 5 years ago now. Harvard Business Review just came out with an article saying the same thing very recently. And one of my favorite books, I think, captures that really well. So I'm going to just read a quote from it. It's called All We Can Save.
Yeah,
And it's essays, a series of essays by female climate leaders. The same patriarchal power structure that oppresses and exploits girls, women, and non-binary people, and constricts and contorts boys and men, also wreaks destruction on the natural world. Dominance, supremacy, violence, extraction, egotism, greed, ruthless competition. These hallmarks of patriarchy fuel the climate crisis just as surely as they do inequality, colluding with racism along the way. And I think I really came to understand that it wasn't good enough to just do a net zero building. Like, we can just put solar panels on everything. But that doesn't really solve the issue of extraction and greed and injustice being at the core of what we're doing. I got really tired of people saying, like, don't worry about it. It's just business. It's just business. Like, saying it's just business lets us get away with a lot of horrible, unjust things.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can solve the climate crisis by business as usual. Like, business as usual got us to where we are. So we need to think not only how we do design and like what we're designing, but like the business structure and who's gaining wealth from the design work that we do.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with Precipitate, is not only change the work, but the way we do the work.
I've heard you talk about this several times, and every time I have to kind of pause and take in the immensity of that lesson and lessons, right? Because I think we all can get so laser focused on the climate crisis as a scientific or technical challenge that we have to solve for. And then we have learned that we have to work within these economic constraints to do that. And I think we have been unfairly taught that there's this decision we have to make between the economy and community or equity versus finding the path that can solve for most, if not all, of these challenges. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair kind of summation of like how you direct your work? Like there's basically a false dichotomy there.
Yeah, definitely. Like, what we like to imagine, what if we could solve it all? Not like making a list of all the barriers. Like, making a list of the barriers is important, but you can't stop there. Yeah. It's just a useful tool to figure out what is the thing that overcomes those barriers.
Yeah. So as you established your business, were these kind of the guiding principles that you said, I'm going to start, and then this is going to be the framework for what we do? That's your mission, correct? Is that?
Yeah. I think the mission was more important than the actual projects, especially at the beginning. People were like, what kind of work do you want to do? And I was like, the work is not as important as doing it in an equitable way. Yeah, collaborative.
Were there any things that you had to do to transition your skills as an architect and a teacher and project manager? You have all these skill sets that you bring in. Was there anything that you had to prioritize to then make the shift to founder?
I think I got lucky in really unplanned ways. So my first job in architecture was as an administrative assistant at a very small architecture firm. So I got to do everything, like insurance and balancing the checkbook and marketing and all these things. And like, that was actually really helpful for me to know the kinds of things, at least like the things I should be thinking about. Because my experience in after graduate school was in larger firms where those were kind of different people did that. And I was just focused on the project work. I have always been really engaged in the marketing and business development piece. So that kind of came naturally. I think the hardest part was figuring out what I didn't know And for that, I reached out to other women founders in architecture who connected me to very graciously their accountant and their insurance agent and some of those pieces that I would need to build a business.
That's such a great encapsulation of what we talk about with founders often is like, don't be afraid to test out some skills that might be either a little rusty or have not been your focus area, especially when you're talking to folks who have a technical expertise. That's what we're talking about here, right? As STEM founders. And so those early, I mean, I feel that same way as I was a community organizer. You just do everything in that office, right? And then you apply those skills, but knowing when you need to ask for help, that's such a sign of wisdom in your journey. So that's great. What has been unexpected for you? Maybe a lot of it, but anything that stands out as far as like, I wouldn't have expected this as a founder.
I think that people resonate with the message because when I was in traditional architecture worlds, I think other people thought it was crazy. I thought it was maybe a little crazy. Like people would say that's not how we do architecture. And I was like, yeah, I know that's not how we do architecture. That's maybe how we should, though. And I think that the fact that it has worked out is surprising. I didn't have any guarantee that it would. But I knew I couldn't continue on in the path that I was going. Like, I wasn't doing anything for the climate crisis or equity, and I couldn't, given my demographics. I couldn't make any more change than I had already done, and I was just making it worse for everyone else. So yeah, just like that we've been successful has been exciting. I think too, we went to a site visit for a new what we're calling a permaculture homestead yesterday as a team, and we were talking about our process, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna, like, don't tell us anything about the land first. We're gonna walk the land and like let the land speak to us, and just have a moment here and listen, which I think is it was interesting because for us, for like right now, that's not weird or radical to say, but like it actually is. Like most architects don't go to a site and say, we're going to listen to the land now. Like we just stood in silence for a few minutes, you know? And then at the end, like we would talk, okay, like get your survey and we'll understand that the topography and hydrology, but like there's something about just being there, listening to the birds and watching the deer and like looking at the snow patterns that we say doesn't matter for design and actually matters a lot. And seeing the client respond really positively to that. Like we gave them a hug. Like that's not normal either when you first meet someone. And like reframing what's normal and how you can work with people and collaborate with them, like what it means to be a client and what it means to be a professional. Like I think we have to break down some of those barriers in order to create different kinds of work.
Yeah. That's going to sit with me for a bit, but I in particular, I think about having worked on a lot of multifamily development in my previous work in, brownfield redevelopment and site development. You hear a lot from neighbors, I just don't want to see the same thing. So even if someone's not automatically connecting with the listening and the permaculture homestead, like these other things, this idea of what comes on the other side of it, like this unique design and functional design, like I think a lot of people can connect with the outcomes even if they don't fully understand the process. And I hope that continues, like those really amazing outcomes will continue to build support for what you're that's what this means.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing at the end, right?
Yeah.
You're going to win hearts and minds, I think, in that, and get lots more hugs, maybe.
Yeah.
That's great. Talk a little bit about some of the hurdles for you. I'm really glad to hear you say, I'm a little surprised by success. I understand that feeling. But it also means you're getting to a point where you're saying, I feel that success. So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges along the way.
Yeah, I think, I left the architecture firm where I had been working and started this business. And then I went to a women business owner class, was like one of my first things. And they were like, the majority of your businesses will fail within the first year, like all these depressing statistics. It was not very helpful for someone who was already like had no other options. Like either leave the profession or we're gonna make this work. And I think there was just like a lot of that societal narrative of you're going to fail at this. And I think that was a lot more difficult to overcome than any of the logistical pieces.
Mhm.
Like those were fine. Figuring out software, figuring out insurance and business structure. It was just like the daily negativity was challenging. And I also think just not being in a culture that supports innovation and startups. Like you have health insurance if you work for a large business, but not if you are out on your own and you don't have access to sick days. And like I still don't have sick days because I am the owner.
Yeah.
I didn't get maternity leave because I'm the owner, right? Like it doesn't have to be that way. Like we could change how we support people. Um, but I think especially for people like myself who have chronic health issues and are still trying to do this. And I just had a baby, like those make it a lot more complicated. And those are like typically women have more babies. And yeah, the burden of us not having a societal support structure, I think increasingly impacts women who want to try something new.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel the pressure of like, I'm not there for my family as much as I want to be.
Yeah.
And choosing between being there for my employees and being there for my family is something that I feel a lot that I just don't think there's like the societal pressure as much for male identifying founders.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing those because I know these are personal. I know they're real challenges that keep women from taking this path. I've had many of the same feelings, leaving a well-paying job at a great company that I still do work with. And you have this, thought in the back, what have I done? Right? Like my family's going to be okay. Right. And that you and I both recognize too, that even to get to that point, it's like, as a woman, you overcome all these things, but we're still operating from a place of stability, from, being partnered and having other mechanisms of stability that prevent other people from trying this too. And so having this collective agreement that we need to create the safety net or the boost for other folks to come in this, like we're missing out on really cool ideas and really cool businesses because we don't open those opportunities up. So thank you for naming them in the way that you did. Back to pride and success. So again, hearing you say, like, I feel like we're, I can be surprised by my success now. What have been some of the proudest moments for you, or some of the things that you say, this has been a definition of success for me?
Yeah, I think most of them have been not things that I have done, but working over many, many years to build coalitions to accomplish things together that are beyond what I could do as one individual. I think one example of that is working with the Passive House Minnesota group and Passive Alliance in Minnesota, as well as Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition and their whole list of partners. There's dozens of them. We submitted 2 letters to Minnesota Housing for their qualified allocation process and asking for additional points for higher performing buildings that get close to the net zero carbon neutral pathway. So Passive House and zero energy ready homes with solar and things, programs like that, getting additional points for affordable housing funding. Little like trying to like first identify what those little tweaks are that can make a big impact, like levers in the system that could make a big change. And then working with a coalition over a long period of time to make that happen. So it looks like those additional points will in fact be in the QAP for this upcoming cycle, which is really, really exciting. And we've seen it have made a big impact in the capacity of the building industry in other states where that has happened, not only for affordable housing, but then, you know, growing the capacity and skills to apply that to other types of housing as well. So yeah, those, I feel like sometimes the architecture projects that we do are kind of like a way for us to test and experiment with like what's needed, what's most needed, and take risks, and then know what the most impactful and reasonable policy asks are.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I'm so deeply appreciative of how generous you are with your successes, right? Like the wins are collective wins. And you and I both know that we don't do any of this work in a vacuum. And I think part of the reason I've always loved working with you is because we're like, where can we help each other and where can we get to something better?
Yeah.
By bringing more, like we're big table people, I think.
Yeah.
And I also want to, you know, continue to hype you as a leader, right? So your leadership, your chutzpah, your work in this space leads to the big table and leads to collective impact. So I want to honor that individual contribution and leadership and risk taking that comes to that, even if you're just gonna like blush and say okay when I say it. But I you know, it's a lot of hard work to get to those things too. So yeah,
I do think it's like it's maybe that founder energy is like being the annoying mosquito that will be like, are we gonna get to the table? Let's get to the table. Where's the table? Let's set the table. Come to the table. Like, yeah. I'm not going to go away. Either talk with me or I'll annoy you forever.
Yes.
So it's easier to just have the conversation.
I love that. I often think about when, you know, the work leading up to this. I mean, I'm almost 20 years into this work in the sector. And I think, you know, cashing in every chip, but also like, I'm glad I have all these relationships so that I can be a pest into the work. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, we know Nina well enough. We know she's not going to go.
Yeah, I think that's another success I feel is like empowering my team to also pester people. Like I get really excited when like I'm not at a meeting and somebody from my team is like identifies an issue and is like, what can we do as a team to change this in state policy or in building guidelines or in the way we do our process work. Like that's really exciting because I think that's the thing that isn't in traditional culture as much. Mm-hmm. Like there's just this like, oh, nobody can change something unless you're the CEO, you have no power. Like you're just gonna like see things that you know could be better and you'd have no power to change anything. But like knowing that my employees feel respected and empowered enough to like have the discussion as a team about how we can change things, like even interns a year or two out of college, being able to identify things that need to change. That's really exciting.
And that is so powerful. I mean, I even think about my innovation journey ties back to an experience I had working at Best Buy Corporate, where the person who brought me in and mentored me there just made me believe that that was the baseline, right? Like that change was absolutely on the table. And then I got out into the rest of the world. I'm like, oh, and other people don't operate this way. That's not normal. And you're like, okay, but I'm still going to do that. But it really, to me, leads to these two things around entrepreneurship that stick, which is it's not always that we believe in ourselves that leads us to entrepreneurship. It's that we believe in the mission and we believe in change, right? Mm-hmm. You have to like have those two founding beliefs of what you're doing, and that the world can adapt to what you're trying to change, right? Is that fair, would you say?
Yeah, I think I haven't heard that before, and I really like that. I think that I didn't early on believe that the world could change, but I knew that I was gonna do everything in my power. I was gonna make people tell me why we couldn't do equitable climate neutral work.
Yeah.
And I think it's been exciting to like show that it is possible. Someone a couple of days ago described Precipitate as avant-garde. Like what we're doing is a few years ahead of what everyone else will be doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really different from what it initially felt like, which was like crazy folks like off the path completely, just doing a different thing, right? Like,
Right.
I think that's a really big shift for us too.
I love that. I will use that framing and talking to innovators too, right? To just get from feeling like you're an oddball to your prescient.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like this. It's a silly analogy, but the Wayne Gretzky skate to where the puck is going is the one that I always come back to. And I mean, that's what you're doing, and so we'll just call you Gretzky from now on. But what advice would you give to other women considering entrepreneurial pathways?
You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
It's not, if you haven't found your team yet, just keep looking and keep meeting people. And it's really, I think, what makes a successful entrepreneur is having relationships and developing them. With everybody from like our insurance agent who's like, oh, what weird question are you going to ask me about now? But like still supports us in that, to people who are potential and current clients. You never know what relationship is going to lead to something. And I think it's hard and it's a balance, right? Because I think there's a lot of like, women tend to say yes to everything. And like, there's a lot of value in saying no. But then I had some students ask me, like, how did I meet my awesome team? And it was because I said yes to random things, like a resilience workshop, like in the middle of the day once in Minneapolis led me to Yannicka, and saying yes to teaching led me to Imani, saying yes to having a student intern, even though it was like a lot of work and we didn't know what she would do, led us to having Rueda on our team. So like you never know what yes is going to lead to the next big thing. And I think balancing that and knowing that you should say yes to everything, because like you could be losing out on a lot of big things, with taking care of yourself and letting your body survive to the next day, week, year. I think that's the most challenging piece, because you have to do both.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that resonates so much. I mean, someone had given me the book Essentialism years ago, and it was so game-changing for me because it was like this enabling of no, because I also felt like there's so much to do, there's so many big opportunities. We were a real small team, and saying yes felt like such a fail, or saying no felt like such a failure, and turning that into like this empowering thing, which is by saying no to the things that don't matter and aren't essential, I have more capacity to say yes to what's important. But that how to make those decisions, I think, takes some experience and some empowerment. And so I'm really glad you talked about that too.
I think just like trust in yourself. I'd say that's the biggest thing, is like, if you listen to yourself, like giving yourself the space and the quietness to be able to listen to your intuition, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, that's a hard one, right? We are filled with decades likely of self-doubt and questioning, and societal norms that get in there. And so if you can get to that, go back to that quiet, whether it's on the land or in your office to hear what you need, that's great. Anything else, Elizabeth, that you'd like to share with the folks who are going to tune in to this session?
Yeah, I think that it's really the hardest thing that I've ever done is starting this business. And I think it's important that I had so many years, like there's 5 years of feeling like a failure, even though we were doing great projects and had an awesome team, and like other people from the outside saw us as really successful. Like I still didn't feel that way. And I think 5 years in, I'm finally starting to feel successful. It's not something that happens overnight. Like there were so many days, especially in the first few years, that I would just have a pit in my stomach all day and not be able to sleep at night. And I cried a lot. And it shouldn't really be like that. It shouldn't be that hard to be an entrepreneur. But I think I just encourage people to not get hung up on that piece and just keep pushing through it. There's an expression that I kind of think about sometimes, and it's if you catch hell, don't hold it. And if you're going through hell, don't stop. Like, just don't stop. Like, you just got to push through it, because there's something on the other side that is like, if you feel that, it probably means you're on the right path.
Wow.
That you should give up.
Yeah. Well, what a wonderful place to end this. I'm going to write that quote out and put it above my computer and remind myself, or listen to this interview again when I need some inspiration. So thank you, Elizabeth. Wonderful to talk with you today. Thank you for all you're contributing to our community and to your industry with the work that you do. I can't imagine a better place for us to kind of kick off this series of conversations, and can't wait to hear from Della and Zara around the corner too. But thank you for your time today. And I hope our audience really gained as much from this conversation as I did.
Thanks so much, Nina.
Yeah.